I just want to say thank you all for the 10K subs. I don't know where I'd be without you guys, and I've been shown a lot of love and support from all of the communities that I'm a part of. And I just want to say thank you all. It means the world to me that you guys care so much. And I don't know what I'm gonna do or if I'm gonna do anything for the 10K special, but I promise I'll give back some way, somehow. All that's left to do is to play the video, so I'm gonna play the video you guys are here for. I've had the Legion Go for over a week at this point. It promises to be the device where you should play all of your PC titles, anything from FPSs to RTSs to basic old platformers. The big question is whether or not Lenovo delivered, whether it's good enough to consider. There's a lot about this device to unpack, and God, I don't know where to begin. So I guess I'll begin with the most important part. The controls. The sticks are Hall effect sticks, which means they shouldn't drift, not for a very long time. In the hands, they feel nice, but there's a weird software dead zone, a pretty big one at that too. Like, okay, you test that in gamepad tester, whatever software, and it doesn't show up, but when you actually play the games, you can feel the dead zone. As of the making of this video, there's no way to set dead zone options. That should come in the future though, according to Lenovo. But you know, aside from software issues, the hardware, the actual stick in my thumb feels great. So in a prior video, I talked about the D-pad not being ideal, especially for fighting games. Well, I learned one major thing. The D-pad is a lot better when you have it docked to the controller. It's not like a physical thing, it's like a psychological thing. It has to do with the ergonomics of holding the controller separately, which I'll get into more later, but if you really want to play games with the D-pad, it's better if you have the controller hooked in so that it doesn't feel nearly as weird as that is to say. There is one part of the controller that my brain absolutely cannot get over. It's the fact that start and select, or I guess menu and view, they're towards the bottom of the controller. I don't know what it is, but when I'm playing a game and I want to press start or select, I end up pressing one of the Legion Go buttons. It's not an ideal location for those system buttons. You could have put those at the bottom, kind of like what they did with the Steam Deck. I would have 100% preferred the start and select buttons towards the top of the controllers. The face buttons are just your standard face buttons. Nothing really stands out. It's good enough, it'll do the job. Very inoffensive. The triggers feel nice. I've said this in my other video and I will say it again. I wish the triggers had more range of motion. The bumpers are interesting because the left bumper is totally normal and it feels nice. It's a very clicky button. The right bumper though is like conjoined at the hip to the mouse 1 button. What this actually means is that RB and M1 are the same button. You can even see this reflected in Lenovo's own software. In regular use, the RB button doesn't feel bad in and of itself. The back buttons feel pretty easy to press, perhaps maybe a little too easy. I'll get back to this point later. Also on the right controller is a singular trackpad. A lot of people have been clamoring for a trackpad ever since the Steam Deck proved that trackpads are viable for gaming. This trackpad, however, is best used for navigating windows. This is a more normal trackpad. And while yes, you could play Slay the Spire using the trackpad, the fact of the matter is this trackpad just isn't very good for like FPSs. There's also the matter of actually clicking with the trackpad itself. It's not a clicky trackpad, so you have to do a sort of song and dance to get it to click. You have to double tap it to click, and then you have to hold it down for a little bit to right click. Just generally clicking with the trackpad feels very clunky. It doesn't feel particularly precise either, but truth be told, you may as well just use the touchscreen instead. Valve put in a ton of work making trackpads viable for gaming. This, however, needs some work. Thankfully, this isn't the only mouse on this device. We have a very special function on the right controller known as FPS mode. FPS mode turns your entire right controller into a mouse. More on that later. These controllers have a neat little party trick, detaching from the main body, becoming a sort of pseudo Nintendo Switch? The ergonomics feel quite different when detached from the device. The controllers feel extremely light. Like, I don't want to say they feel lighter than Joy-Cons, but they might be. I do find myself gripping the controllers a little harder because they feel so light, and as a result, sometimes I accidentally press the back buttons. I do have to adjust how strongly I hold the controller so that I don't accidentally press those back buttons. Also, the process of literally detaching the controllers isn't as smooth as, say, the Nintendo Switch. And there isn't a loud satisfying click when it clicks back together. Sometimes I'm not even sure if the device is secured. Also, fun fact, you can actually turn the controllers on. You can turn on each individual controller by holding down its Legion button, Legion L or Legion R. It should automatically be paired up to the Legion Go. I think holding down the button for 7 seconds is a tad bit too long. So that about covers it for all the basic stuff regarding the controller. But the controller has 2 unique features that you need to look at. The first of which is its twin gyros. Each controller has its own separate gyro, and as such can be mapped to a different functionality. Sadly, Legion space is limited in that regards. You can only map them to left stick or right stick. No mouse gyro, sadly. The big issue with gyro is that there's literally no way to configure the gyro. Legion space has no options for configuring gyro sensitivity. The best you can do is change the right stick sensitivity in game options, but that also affects the stick. It's a promising experience, but the Legion Go software betrays that experience. And also, by itself, you can't configure the gyro in Steam Input because the Legion Go exposes the controller as a standard Xbox 360 controller. The hope is that the guys behind Handheld Companion will get a Legion Go and then make it compatible with the Legion Go. Having the Legion Go controller pretend to be a PS4 controller and then use Steam Input to configure the gyro, I guess I'll make a video about that when that does happen. But the other big question is, do you even need gyro on this device anymore? The Legion Go's right controller has a special function known as FPS mode. FPS mode is the single biggest selling point for the Legion Go. So in FPS mode, your right controller becomes a mouse. M1 and M2 become left and right click, and there's a little scroll wheel right there that's kind of awkward to hit. You have to use your thumb to use that. It does click in though. I know there's a lot of players that use the scroll wheel for a lot of crazy stunts, such as Apex Legends strafe jumping or perhaps Doom Eternal speed running. It all probably works. I mean, it's a scroll wheel. What more do you want it to do, right? The mouse glides really well. It's got those mice feet at the bottom. The mousing surface on the bottom does deteriorate over time. That's just how mice work. I think someone will create aftermarket Legion Go mouse feet, but only time will tell when that'll happen. Anyways, FPS mode, it's fairly intuitive, at least on the right controller, but the true learning curve will happen on the left controller. I know some people use like half a controller on the left side and then use a mouse on the right side. I've never done that before, and so it's really weird feeling. I mean, the idea makes perfect sense. You get the benefit of analog movement with the precision of a mouse. It's just a matter of your brain having to adjust to these two different things being mashed together. That said, the controllers are customizable. You can change them to be whatever buttons you want, whether it be keyboard buttons or controller buttons. You cannot change the buttons to be combo buttons, unfortunately. Like for example, I can't change up on my D-pad to be Alt and F4 at the same time. You'd have to make one button Alt and another button F4. But it's fairly competent. I suppose there is one major issue with this that we'll talk about later in the software section. The mouse is genuinely good enough to be just any other gaming mouse. If you're good with aiming with mouse, then you should be very comfortable with this after maybe an hour of getting used to vertical mice. But is FPS mode only really good for FPSs? Well, no, you can use this to play mouse-intensive games. Like any card game, you could probably play with just the mouse. As for RTSs, you could probably play RTSs casually. But to play at a competitive level, you need a lot of keyboard commands. A lot of commands that you may not be able to map entirely to the Legion Go. So maybe don't play StarCraft with FPS mode? FPS mode is one of the most experimental features of this entire device, and I think it's a successful experiment. Whatever type of game you want to play, the controllers can handle them, provided you're willing to learn, especially for FPS mode. The real duds here are the trackpads. The trackpads just feel awful. Like, the trackpad obviously wasn't meant for playing video games, but I think I would have liked the option to be able to, do that. Like, outside of like super casual mouse-based games. Another thing they can improve for the future iteration is the D-pad. The D-pad isn't great. Yeah, I know I said I got used to the D-pad, but it's still not a great D-pad. It's like a step above the Xbox 360 D-pad. Maybe even 2 steps above, but it's still not preferable, especially not for any D-pad based games. There's also the whole issue with the dead zones, but Lenovo said they're releasing a feature where you can adjust the dead zones, so hopefully I can reduce the dead zones by quite a bit. These controllers don't seem very cheap, and the fact that they have Hall effects means that they're not gonna drift. not with regular use anyways, which is great because these controllers couldn't have been cheap to make. I mean, they seem very expensive. They have all of this technology in them. Oh, I don't think I ever talked about comfort. While the device doesn't feel uncomfortable, it's not like a super comfortable device. It's not nearly as comfortable as a Steam Deck, but I would say it's way more comfortable than the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. So the device in hand feels nice. As a cohesive singular unit, the device does feel heavier than the Steam Deck, but it's not so heavy that it's overbearing. It's not going to give you an arm workout, but the device does feel very dense. I like the materials used. They use the typical laptop plastic, and in the back of the controllers, they use this textured grip, ensuring that the device probably won't slip out of your hands. That said, the default laptop plastic is a bit of a fingerprint magnet, and of course, as is the screen, which we'll talk about later. The device also features a robust built-in kickstand to facilitate that Nintendo Switch fantasy. It's also quite a robust unit, and honestly, it would make for a very good tablet, even without the controllers. Not that I would have ever bought a tablet version of this, but it's nice to know that this can also double as a convenient little tablet, with a big screen to boot. The screen is where all of the action happens, and it looks magnificent. It's a very vibrant display, and looking at it side by side to the ROG Ally and Steam Deck, it does look a little bit more saturated out of the box. Unfortunately, I don't have color testing tools because those are really, really expensive. But even with just my eyes, I can see that the display is just that much more color accurate. And you could easily fool some non-tech heads into thinking that you have an OLED display. It's got a higher resolution and a higher refresh rate, but this has a cost. Multiple, I might add. First and foremost is the battery life. Battery life is guaranteed to suffer because your hardware has to push out more pixels and at a faster rate, meaning it consumes more energy. And secondly, games may not be able to run at that high resolution. It's 1600p, which is bigger than even the ROG Ally, which in itself is bigger than the Steam Deck. For games that are already graphically demanding, it may become unplayable at higher resolutions. And for modern games, you'll either need to enable FSR and turn it down to quality, or perhaps just lower the resolution. But to be honest, I don't really play that many AAA titles. I play a lot of very vibrant games from more obscure developers, many of which I've shown on this channel, so if you want to check out that playlist, there's going to be a link in the top right corner. There's also the massive elephant in the room, that is the lack of variable refresh rate. Variable refresh rate makes your display match the frame rate of a game. So for example, if a game were to drop down to 40 FPS, the display would also drop down to 40 Hz as well. One of the main benefits to variable refresh rate is the elimination of screen tearing. Without variable refresh rate, your only defense against this is enabling VSync. Due to the lack of variable refresh rate, there really isn't a whole lot you can do aside from enabling VSync. With a game like Cyberpunk that runs at lower frame rates, this is more noticeable. But for games that can run at higher frame rates, it's far less noticeable, and it doesn't always happen. So I think adding VRR is a must next time. Aside from making the screen VRR capable, I think the other thing that would make this screen a lot better is to just make it OLED. Just for better black levels, but honestly, OLED is a lot to ask for, especially for the price. Now we get to talk about the meat of the product, the software. Yes, this is a Windows-based device running Windows 11 Home. Windows works best with a keyboard and mouse. How do I know this? Well, it's simple really, I'm using it to edit my videos right now. It seems like all of the PC handheld makers are trying to go for a console-ized experience, but Windows is diametrically opposed to that. Yes, every company, including Lenovo, made their own softwares to deal with Windows and make a more easier to use launcher experience. But sometimes Windows is just Windows and it gets in the way of the experience, no matter how hard you try to mask it. Part of the Steam Deck's success is just how easy it is to use for someone that's basically never used a computer before. SteamOS has basically perfected the console experience, while still providing users enough experience and enough modability to basically go outside of Steam. Gaming on these Windows handhelds require a tacit understanding of how Windows works and how PC gaming works in general, and ultimately it isn't as friendly to users as SteamOS. Your success with the Legion Go or any other Windows-based device depends on how good you are with the Windows jank, how good you are at figuring out these Windows issues, or perhaps more accurately, how good you are at Googling them. If you're good enough with Windows, if you know your way around Windows, then this will be a decent experience. for the most part. Microsoft did quite a bit of work in making Windows 11 touch-friendly. The Legion Go also comes with an essential piece of software, Legion Space, designed to launch all of your games and configure Legion Go settings, such as controller configurations. It also includes a game store that Lenovo has partnered with, Games Planet. You can buy games from them, and you can even get a discount if you've bought a Legion Go. They primarily sell Steam keys, but they also sell keys for other storefronts, such as the Epic Games Store, or Rockstar's launcher, or Ubisoft's launcher. So do keep that in mind when you're buying from the store. Also do keep in mind that there may be better deals outside of this website. If you care enough about getting the best deals, you need to be vigilant. Speaking of these sales, I think that's the first issue I have with the software. The front page is just littered with these sort of deals from Games Planet. Yeah, I know Lenovo, you partnered with them, etc., but I mean, it's a little excessive. The home screen doesn't even cover the last game I've played. It doesn't even give any information aside from just sales on games, and sometimes these games aren't even on sale, so it's basically just advertising. The Steam Deck's UI doesn't even advertise like this, despite the fact that Steam is literally a game store. I'm not impressed. The second issue I have with the software is the fact that there's no per game settings at all. This comes in two forms. First and foremost, there's no TDP settings per game. It's very inconvenient when I need to switch TDPs every time I switch to a different game. I had this issue when the Steam Deck first launched. It didn't have per game TDP settings, and now the Legion Go doesn't either. And the second part is that there's no per game controller settings. This pertains more to using FPS mode, and I'll get to that later. But right now I want to talk about how there's only 3 presets, but there's way more than 3 FPSs out there, some of which have their own unique control schemes. Like, yeah, a lot of the default controls are fine for basic FPSs, you know, you move, you reload, you shoot, you aim down sights, whatever. But games these days are very varied, and I'd like to be able to change controls per game. Like, you know, in Ultra Kill, there's no reload button? Yeah, weird fringe cases like that. That said, I'm sure Lenovo can fix all these issues in post. Also included is some quick access menu stuff. This is where you would access those quick toggles that you need, such as, you know, refresh rate, resolution, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and a performance overlay. And of course, the software can be controlled with both Legion Go buttons. There's one on the left and one on the right. But for whatever reason, Lenovo decided to have the sidebars be controlled by one of the buttons. That is super annoying. For example, you press it once, the right menu pops up. You press it again, the left menu pops up. There's a lot of questions, such as, why does the right button control both? Why does it switch every other time? It's super annoying. Why wouldn't you have the left Legion button control the left side of the menu? There's a lot of questions I have running through my head as to why any of this was designed this way. Also worth mentioning is the fact that Legion Space can be controlled with a controller, both the overlay and the actual program itself. But if you're running a game in the background, it's known to control both the Legion Space overlay as well as the game running in the background as well. So like, if I'm moving left or right in the menu, my character that's still being controlled in the game also moves left, right in the background as well, and that's super annoying. Let's also talk about the performance overlay, because the performance overlay does not work properly. It tells you CPU and GPU and RAM usage and power, battery, all that cool stuff, but the one thing it's supposed to tell you, the frame rate, the FPS, does not work half the time. Half the time it shows 0 FPS, even though the game is clearly running above 0 FPS. Just use Handheld Companion. So yes, the software situation is a mess, but it can be fixed in post, I guess. So this is all stuff Lenovo should fix, and I hope Lenovo takes this to heart and fixes the software so that it can be as good as it should be. Now we get to talk about battery life. Battery life is surprisingly decent if you manage to lower the resolution and lower the refresh rate. I did a battery test, and I'm going to do a second battery test with more accurate results next time, so stick around. You won't want to miss it. As for performance, there's a quiet, balanced, and performance mode, all of which can be set through the Legion Space overlay, the little quick menu that I complained about earlier. When it comes to performance, the main gotcha moment is the fact that a lot of modern AAA titles, they don't really run well at 1600p. Like, let's look at Cyberpunk 2077. That's like the most graphically demanding game I own, that's why I always use it. On the Steam Deck preset at 1600p, it runs terribly. Now, to be fair, the Steam Deck preset isn't fully all low everything. Some settings are actually set to high for whatever reason. You could maybe eke out 2 to 5 more frames if you turned everything down to low, all the way down, ultra, performance, everything. But get this, if you lower the resolution down to 800p, you get significantly more gains in performance. Yeah, for whatever reason, the game was having issues full screening at 800p, so this will have to do. As you can see here, it's running significantly faster, and the average frame rate is more than double that of running it at 1600p. Yes, common knowledge dictates that if a game is running poorly, you should probably lower the resolution, and common knowledge is proven correct once again. So for major AAA titles, you will have to lower the resolution, or use a higher tier power profile. I was only using the 15-watt balanced profile, where you could use the performance profile and get better performance as well, at the cost of battery life, that is. Thankfully, the gaming industry isn't just massive AAA titles. There are plenty of great indie titles as well. For example, Dead Cells. Yeah, Dead Cells is a few years old at this point, but it's still very much an excellent title. At the standard 15-watt TDP, Dead Cells frame rate is insanely high, most of it actually being above the refresh rate of the Legion Go itself. There is no in-game frame rate cap, unfortunately. There's VSync, but VSync limits your FPS down all the way to 60 FPS. Dead Cells still also runs really well on the quiet preset, though obviously it runs at a much lower frame rate, a mere 90 FPS instead of like 170 to 180. That might be the play. Now let's talk about the built-in speakers. The built-in speakers are ultimately worse than the ROG Ally and worse than the Steam Deck. Now don't get me wrong, it's fine and it's serviceable, but in my own experience, it sounds like there's just less audio fidelity. The audio just sounds a little tinier, and the mids seem to suffer as a result. It also doesn't help that the speakers are top-firing speakers compared to the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck, which have front-facing speakers. As a result, the Legion Go just sounds a little quieter at similar volume levels to the ROG Ally. The audio isn't playing directly towards you, so it just sounds quieter in comparison. Now, to be fair, it probably wasn't possible to put in front-facing speakers because the controllers detach, and both the Deck and Ally put their speakers like right under the controls. Both of the other devices could afford to put bigger drivers, whereas the Legion Go really couldn't. Now, like I iterated, there's nothing wrong with the speakers. They sound perfectly fine for built-in speakers. That said, there is a headphone jack built into it, meaning you can use this with basically any headphone or IEM that you own. Speaking of headphone jacks, let's talk about the ports. There are two USB Type-C ports, one at the top and one at the bottom. Thank God someone had the sense to make a device with two USB Type-C ports. It's USB 4, which means in theory you could use this with an external GPU. I don't have one of those right now, and in this economy, I'm probably not going to get one. That said, there are plenty of videos on YouTube showcasing the Legion Go being used with an external GPU. That's awesome for those that want to use this as their main PC. I'm contemplating using this as a replacement for my laptop, because my laptop is way weaker than this as is. There's also a micro SD card slot, and it looks like the card slot is further away from the exhaust. Lenovo says this card slot supports up to 2TB micro SD cards, but I've never seen a legitimate 2TB micro SD card before. I've heard there are prototypes, but I've never seen one that's actually out in the wild that you can buy right now. Yo Lenovo, if you know where I can find one of these 2TB micro SD card slots, I'll get some for myself. The big question is whether or not this micro SD card slot will have the same issue as the ROG Ally's own micro SD card slot. That is, the micro SD card slots being burned out. My brother actually bought an ROG Ally and his micro SD card slot burned out and he had to get it ARM-made. The card slot doesn't look close enough to be burned out by the exhaust, but you know, only time will tell. This also supports UHS 2 micro SD cards, but UHS 2 cards are prohibitively expensive. Not to mention, they don't come in great big capacities. The biggest UHS 2 cards I could find were 256GB cards, and that's like $100 on Amazon. You could buy a 1TB UHS 1 micro SD card for $100. Yeah, I guess it would be a lot slower, but it would also be a lot more spacious. So my advice is to wait until they start making at least 512GB UHS 2 cards. On the topic of the Legion Go, let's talk about accessories. Well, the first accessory, of course, is the humble carrying case that it comes with. It's big enough to house the device, the little magnetic puck, maybe an extra stick cap, and that's about it. It's a case that comes with a device. That's more than what I can say about the ROG Ally, which comes with no case. It's very similar to the Steam Deck's own carrying case that it comes with, except it's a lot bigger, and also there's a little slit at the bottom that you can open up to charge your device in the case itself. This is a lot more finicky than I was expecting because it doesn't perfectly align sometimes. Like sometimes I have to open up the case again to realign the device, push the device down ever so slightly so that I can actually access the USB Type-C port. There's also the fact that sometimes the Legion Go will just turn itself back on when it's plugged in, so if it's in the case when that happens, then the device will begin to cook itself inside the case. Now, I'm no expert about fires, and I'm no pyromaniac either. One has to wonder if this isn't just one big fire hazard, and I tried it out. Thankfully, my house didn't burn down overnight, so I'm sure it's not a fire hazard. Still though, I wouldn't recommend charging it inside the case. I would recommend, putting it outside the case and then just plugging it in. Yes, technically speaking, you won't need any other case to house this device in. And I mean, currently there's no case out there that can house this device other than say the Tomtoc sling bag. And I would probably just use that over the actual case itself because it's more spacious. There's more room for more accessories. I will say fitting the Legion Go inside this bag is a bit of a tighter fit. It'll work, but I would say this is basically the upper limit of what you can fit inside this bag. The Legion Go also comes with a charger. It's a 65-watt charger. It comes wrapped in paper, so be sure to peel it off before you actually use it. I will say this charger is a fair bit smaller than the ROG Ally's own charger at 65 watts. It works, but I think gallium nitrate chargers are way cooler if you've already got one. Gallium nitrate chargers are sorely underrated. Yes, they're just chargers at the end of the day, but they're very useful, and they can consolidate multiple chargers into one block. They're also a lot smaller and a lot more easily transportable, and also powerful enough to charge up laptops, like a MacBook if you've got one of those. If you want one of these, you'll need something that can charge at minimum 65 watts. And even if you don't want one of these bigger blocks that can charge multiple devices, you can buy a gallium nitrate charger that's way smaller than the Legion Go's own charger, and you can pair that with a wire that's even longer than the Legion Go's own wire, giving you the best of both worlds, portability and charger length. But I like consolidating all of my chargers into one block, so I prefer the bigger ones. Now let's talk docks. I have a lot of Steam Deck docks, and they also work on the ROG Ally as well. Do they also work on the Legion Go? Unfortunately, many docks are just too small to comfortably fit the Legion Go. Many of the docks released right now were made for the Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck has its USB Type-C port on the right side of the device. The Legion Go has its Type-C port on the left side of the device, not to mention the device is also taller. Yes, you could make it fit. You could make it work, but it's very tight and I'm kind of worried that something's gonna get messed up. The device has its own kickstand, so you're better off just using a dock that isn't also a stand either. Something like one of those USB Type-C dongles or like the JSOX Omni case. That's a good one. And for a little bit of customization and some protection, you can get some D-brand skins. D-brand actually sent me a set of skins and some tempered glass panels for my Legion Go. Since my first debut with skins, I've gotten a lot better at applying them. Same deal with screen protectors. It's a good screen protector, but I also kind of didn't see a dust spec, so that's my fault. I think screen protectors are a must on touchscreen devices, even if you're not really using the touchscreen a lot because, well, it's a screen to protect. Like with D-brand's other screen protector offerings for like the Steam Deck, this offering includes 2 screen protectors. One to attempt to install and then invariably mess up, and one to hopefully do a little better. I'll need to reapply this screen protector on my own time, but it's good stuff when applied properly, that is. I can't believe I got this far without talking about the Wi-Fi. The Legion Go features Wi-Fi 6E. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't have a Wi-Fi 6E capable router, so I can't exactly put it through its paces, but what I can tell you is that it's noticeably faster when it comes to downloading content than the Steam Deck. Being that the Steam Deck is limited to Wi-Fi 5. Unfortunately, I can't make full use of the Lenovo Legion Go's Wi-Fi, but even without Wi-Fi 6E throughout my house is rock solid. There's also Bluetooth connectivity, Bluetooth 5.0 more specifically. Admittedly, I'm not too well read on Bluetooth capabilities. From what I've read, 5.2 introduces a lot of great features for, well, earbuds. Like for example, I've got some Sony WF-1000 XM4s, capable of Bluetooth 5.2. In the Legion Space software, there is a Bluetooth option, but the only option in there is to either enable or disable Bluetooth, and there's a link in there that tells you to click on it to manage Bluetooth in Windows. What's the point of having a separate Bluetooth tab for your settings if most of the Bluetooth stuff has to be done in Windows? That just seems kind of silly, doesn't it? Anyways, the Bluetooth pairing process is the same as it is on Windows. You just add a device and then initiate the pairing process on whatever device you want to do, and then click on the device and then it should be added. So yes, Bluetooth audio on Windows is a decent experience. If you want to listen to music, that is. Even just basic typing on the touchscreen keyboard, I can hear the delay in sound. And of course, I pulled up a latency tester, and lo and behold, there's a delay in audio. It's not a Lenovo Legion Go issue, it's not a headphone issue, heck, it's not even a Windows issue, it's just Bluetooth. Bluetooth audio is just terrible for video games, and especially terrible for rhythm games. If you want a good earbud experience, get yourself some IEMs. I promise you, some good quality ones will be not only cheaper, but also better sounding than your $200+ wireless earbuds. That said, you can also use Bluetooth to pair up to some wireless controllers. There is a wide variety of controllers out there, but I've got here the big WAN Blitz controller that I reviewed a while back. You can pair it to the Legion Go and play just fine. But with the Legion Go having detachable wireless controllers, you may not need an additional controller to take with you. But hey, it might be good for a second player, right? Also, I want to talk about the tablet experience. Yes, technically this is a tablet. You detach the controllers and it's a tablet. Most Windows apps aren't designed for the touch experience, but in spite of all that, the touch experience is surprisingly decent. Windows 11 also includes the Windows subsystem for Android and the Amazon App Store, giving you access to a bunch of Android apps and games like Arknights or Epic 7. Do note that not all Android games work properly through the subsystem, and for whatever reason, sometimes the games just perform poorly for some reason. I couldn't tell you why though, sadly. Let's talk price. The current base model of the Legion Go is $699. This comes with a 512GB SSD. For an additional $50, you can buy the 1TB version. But if you live near a micro center, you can get a Legion Go that's been upgraded to 2TB for $799, an additional $50 over the 1TB model. $100 extra really isn't a bad price for 4 times the storage. It's not a cheap device by any stretch of the imagination, but it is the same price as the Z1 Extreme version of the ROG Ally. I would say it's actually a pretty decent price, and it comes with a carrying case too. That said, as of the making of this video, the ROG Ally is actually $80 off. A Black Friday special, says Best Buy. So what are my final thoughts on the Legion Go? Well, the Legion Go is an exciting, one heck of a fun time to play with. I suspect there will be a lot of updates, and I'm hoping some of these updates fix some of the issues I've had with the device personally. That said, a good chunk of the device is the fact that Windows will just do Windows things, and Windows things on handhelds are a lot more difficult to deal with. But the hardware, I love it. It's great. It feels great in my hands. I love having a big, beefy, badass rig, and honestly, I don't need to take my laptop anymore, so I might just get a keyboard and just stuff that in my bag as well. I would be interested in one of those like Surface Book style laptop cover things that has like one of those keyboards, like you know the iPad keyboards that they used to make or that they still make. I think I would genuinely be interested in something like that for this device. FPS mode is a literal game changer. It truly feels like the first Windows device where I could feasibly play all of my PC games. Using the right controller as a sort of PC gaming mouse feels incredibly natural. The only difficulty here being the scroll wheel being in a weird spot. But there is an immense learning curve, especially for your left-hand grip. It'll take you a couple of rounds that you definitely will lose, but it's worth it. The screen is big and beautiful, but unfortunately results in lower battery life. Unless of course you lower the resolution and also lower the refresh rate. You could use Radeon RSR to upscale the image, but I'll have to do more research on that. It's a worthwhile competitor, and while its bigger size means you have to adjust yourself accordingly, it's very versatile. Far more versatile than the ROG Ally, and I would even argue more versatile than the Steam Deck. But weird software issues keep this from being the best experience possible. Some of it is the Legion Go software, missing some key features such as per game TDPs and per game controller settings. And some of it is Windows just being Windows and not being designed for a handheld. But I will say Lenovo's been very good about letting Linux run on their devices, unlike Asus of course. It seems like Bazzite on Lenovo Legion Go is a reality, and it seems like it's going to be a worthwhile alternative. As of right now, it's still very much a work in progress, but progress is being made at an alarmingly fast rate. Stay tuned. One of the big issues with PC gaming on a handheld is that there are plenty of games people want to play that don't really work well on controller. The Steam Deck answers this question with trackpads and Steam Input input. The Legion Go answers this with FPS mode. If you like this video, be sure to press the thumbs up button and spread the good gospel of high-tech lowlife. And if you want to see more high-tech lowlife, be sure to subscribe and press the bell icon for notifications. And for you enlightened individuals, be sure to join my Discord server. And if you wish to support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page, links in the description down below.